Coleman Report Live, special Monday edition, March 23, 2020. We're bringing Chris Hearn back as our CEO and founder of Fountainhead Capital. And Chris, what did you do all weekend?
I worked.
So
talked to a lot of people in Washington.
Joseph,
I didn't treat my wife as well as I should have. Yeah.
Joseph, go back. I know we have some new attendees. Please download these certificates of participation. It satisfies SBA's requirement when they ask you what you were doing for training. You also may get asked that question from your regulator as well as your auditors. So, and Joseph, it's in the handout there. And I think he sent that out in the email. So that's a free service from us. Chris, I've been following the news. So have you. You went through 397 pages?
93, but yeah.
All right. I just heard, was watching the news, and they think they're going to get this done today. This is not final,
right?
But give us a sense of what you think is going to happen.
Yeah, I think it's going to pass the Senate today. There's a companion piece over on the House side. My guess is they've debated this stuff enough, and they've been negotiating nonstop for over a week now. I think it'll move pretty quickly through the House, and I don't know, maybe tomorrow night, Tuesday night, it'll get its way to the president. More than likely, more like Wednesday, and then the race is on to promulgate the rules, as I've been saying. And so I sincerely hope that the agency has been carving out some time, locking the doors, turning off the phones, focusing on this and how it'll be.
They're working on
this. I'm sure.
Now, what is your understanding of, there's a bunch of numbers being thrown around here. Is this all going to be lender-driven loans or disaster loans?
No, we're just talking about lender-made loans, through the 7A, what is now going to be called the SBA 7A relief loans. Yeah.
And the number's still 300 billion?
No, it's up to 349 as of yesterday. So,
I got to work my numbers.
49 billion between friends, right?
Okay. And next slide, Joseph. We're talking about a $10 million loan cap. Tell us how this works.
We're not really sure. That's probably the piece that is getting the most attention right now in this legislative process in terms of how these loans are going to be determined. It's not quite the average of the trailing 12 months of operational expenses. That's actually my suggestion to them to make it simpler. The way the legislation was written as of yesterday morning, I think it was a slight mistake, which is it was just taking the payroll, so salaries and benefits, et cetera, adding in facility expenses, adding in monthly debt obligations. We'd gotten utilities included in there. I think we had insurance in there, and then taking that times 2.5, and it was the lesser of that or $10 million. The problem is that presumes then that you're only going to cover this for 2.5 months.
Chris, what is the acronym for TTM?
Trailing 12 months.
Trailing 12
months. Yeah. So my suggestion was to make it the multiplier either 4 or 6 or 12. So we basically are covering things for 4, 6, or 12 months. And I think that's a simpler process. The House bill actually has something in it that would take the monthly operational expenses and take it times 400, which is the same thing I'm saying, take it times 4. So I think I think we're going to land somewhere in the middle of that.
Very good. Let's go to the next slide.
Yep, there you go. So you got it.
And we just maxed out our capacity on our attendees. We'll fix that next by tomorrow.
What is that, 500 or more? Or?
Yeah, 500 lines.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, so again, explain. Again,
so you've got the multiplier. Yeah, the multiplier is basically just the representation of the number of months that you're taking times these payroll expenses and or the operational expenses that I'm talking about. It's just to conceptualize how big the loan will be made up to the $10 million. That's really all this is.
Now, I've been reading some stuff. Is there a chance for these to be a grant, or are these purely loan functions?
These are loans, but as it stands right now, the legislation will include a forgiveness provision. Now, the problem is the forgiveness provision will come into play it'll start approximately 60 days after what's called the covered period. The covered period is basically the beginning date of the crisis, which current legislation has it as February 15th, and it goes through to June 30th as the covered period, okay? And basically what the loan forgiveness is going to key off of is how many of your employees you retain during the covered window. And we don't know quite what that formula is going to ultimately roll out to. I don't know that anybody does at this moment, but presumably we're going to get a lot more details in the coming weeks or months ahead. And suffice to say, if you keep employees, and I don't know if you rehire employees, if that's going to count or not, I suspect it might, then you're going to get some sort of forgiveness on your loan.
What is the amount that the lender can charge interest rate wise?
It appears, we asked for some clarification yesterday and some response to Senate staff. It appears that it's the maximum under the rules now for a normal SBA 7A, so it would be prime plus 275. Yeah, so 6% right now.
Go to the next slide, please, Joseph. All right, this is, I've had a ton of questions on this from yesterday and today. Try to clarify this for us, Chris.
Well, there's sort of the complication pieces as it relates to SBA on this legislation relates to deferment and relates to the forgiveness. We just talked about the forgiveness thing. We have to punt on that for a little bit. But the deferment piece, it appears that borrowers would be eligible to request deferment right after they've been funded for one of these loans for a period up to 12 months, so long as they ask for the deferment during the covered period, which again is that, obviously we're past February now, but up until June 30th. I think you're going to have some complications. I think that sets off some other issues, unintended consequences. What I suggest, yeah, exactly. Yeah, which a third of SBA participating lenders participate in the secondary market. And so this would potentially tie up their capital many longer months than I think they would like to see, or definitely impede their ability to make more of these loans. So we want to try and do something that's a little simpler. Not everybody is a too big to fail bank that can hold these loans on their balance sheet indefinitely, and I think the agency understands that. So what I've suggested, and I'm not, I don't know that this is going anywhere at this very moment, but what I've suggested is why not use whatever the multiplier is going to be. You want these loans to cover these costs for so many months, whether it's 4, 6, or 12. Why not also go ahead and calculate the principal and interest payments and add that to the loan? And therefore, we're not dealing with deferments until after the fact, until some months into the future when things might actually settle down a little bit, and then let SBA decide how long of a deferment they want to grant that borrower at that time.
Chris, do you see the Fed buying these loans?
Yes. Well, I see the Fed as an ultimate backstop buying these loans, but I think there's going to be a number of large institutional buyers of these loans ultimately. But probably as it's currently proposed, the legislation, I don't think a lot of these buyers of these loans would occur until probably late third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter, which is the period of time that I'm saying could impede the ability of more loans to be made. But I would expect, like the current approved pool assemblers on the 7A market, I imagine they will probably want to purchase some of these. I imagine there's going to be a lot of other large institutions, whether they're credit funds or insurance companies or whatnot, that'll probably want to do it. But ultimately, yes, the Fed will have the opportunity to be the final purchaser, so to speak.
Chris, what is the guaranteed percentage on these loans?
100%.
100%. Very good. And
there's no credit. There's no capital weighting against these loans. It's zero. So I could see. I mean, if you were a bank and wanted to hold this paper, you've got virtually no risk. So, if you got a big enough balance sheet, go for it.
Sort of back to the first lien position of the 504 loans that we get. Hey, let's go through now these are, poll question. Do you support these measures? What do you think, Chris?
I do, but I appreciate the honesty of the I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. All right, let's go through these are some of your additional items of concern. Go through them very quickly.
Very quickly. So this one is basically, as a lot of folks in the SBA world understand, SBA is very sensitive about change of ownership. They often do a 6-month look back. And so I'm saying that you should kind of throw that out the window, going all the way back to 1/1/18 through the beginning of the covered period, which is 2/15. This is obviously very inside baseball, but again, I don't think we want to prohibit somebody who's had a change of ownership during that period of time to make them ineligible for one of these SBA 7A relief loans. So it's just a quick tweak.
Life insurance?
We're trying to get confirmation that they've waived life insurance. The current legislation will not have collateral. The current legislation will not have personal guarantees, which those two things for the loan amount. There's no personal guarantees, which I understand I don't think has ever been done for SBA loans. Where those have implications to speed up the process is that might allow us not to have to bring in some third-party vendors like to do judgment and lien searches, for instance. Again, we're trying to get more clarification on that. But if these loans are going to be subordinate to other debt and they're not going to have any UCC, they may have UCC filings. We're not really sure. But the point is, you may not have to pull credit. It may not be necessary to determine if a borrower has other tax liens or other judgments. My recommendation was to make sure that you do a quick LexisNexis search and see if they're current on their child support or if they've got a recent bankruptcy. I think that, we're trying to balance expediency with prudent lending still,
yes.
And that's difficult with these times. But I'm just, some of these things I've thrown out there for them to consider as we put this all together. We build the plane as we jumped off the cliff. It's tough right now. But life insurance, if we don't need life insurance, are we going to need business liability insurance and business personal property insurance? I would say yes. But maybe there's a delayed feature that we can collect the insurance certs within 30 days of the closing or within 30 days of the president declaring the national emergency over. I mean, these are the kinds of inside baseball stuff that we've got to start thinking about because these will be part of the rules that are going to come out after the legislation's passed.
The next one, confirm that the term of the lease does not match the term of the loan. How does that issue come up?
It comes up a lot of times on SBA 7A loans. You want to make sure that you at least that you don't have your borrower getting thrown out on the street in their leased property while you still have a loan outstanding to them. So again, simple technical matter. We just got to kind of throw it out the window. Just like the current legislation also sets aside the credit elsewhere test. It also sets aside the personal resources test. They also have reversed the interim final rule. So we're back probably to where we were prior to March 11th. So there's a lot going on.
Very good. And again, the minimum credit score, is that in the legislation or is that talking to where's that coming from?
There's none. What I'm saying here is we need to confirm that there's no minimum credit score or any other restrictions regarding the outstanding credit issues of the applicant. Or you know what? Tell us now. What are the restrictions? If somebody has a bankruptcy within the last 3 years or 7 years, tell us so participating members can do it.
Give us the rules, we'll follow them.
Yeah, that's right.
But let's get in the spirit of the national emergency.
That's right. That's right.
I have 2 friends of mine who own restaurants. They want to pay their people, and they can't. They're out of business. Please.
I did a webinar a couple hours ago, and I've gotten tons of emails since. More mid-sized companies. These are people that are going to want the $5 to $10 million SBA 7A relief loans, and some of these are steel manufacturers. Some of them are restaurateurs with multiple locations. I mean, it's affecting everybody, and I can't emphasize it enough. Yeah, they have to hustle. They have to hustle.
Who cares? Okay. What What about general liability or business insurance?
Well, again, we just need a confirmation. Are they going to require it or not? And if they are going to require it, I would ask that they be thoughtful about giving us some time to put that in place. Because I still think what are we up to now? Like 8 or 9 states where they're not quite saying shelter in place or lockdown. They're saying you're supposed to stay home. I think they're trying to be a little nicer, more pleasant on it. But effectively, you've got about a third of the country now that is supposed to stay home. And I think it's a matter of time before everybody is supposed to stay home. So that makes getting some of these things rather difficult. As a lender, unless you have some relaxation on some normal of the requirements, it's going to be very tough for you to fund these loans until you would have like insurance certificates, for instance. And we don't want to have to necessarily rely on the insurance industry to hold up these funding.
Chris, how are you going to close these loans?
As fast as I can.
I guess what I'm saying,
as responsible as I can.
Yeah.
What's that?
I mean, are people to come into your office? You're going to do this old school, sending them packages?
So this was one of the things that I started thinking about early last week, and right now, you can't do electronic signatures with SBA, and that's just going to be very, very problematic in this situation, particularly if everyone is sheltering in place. And so again, this is something that I've been pushing since Wednesday of last week, that we need to allow for electronic signatures. And again, we'll use best efforts to send the originals to them within so many days post-crisis or whatever the guidelines are going to be. But there's a way to do this so that we can process more of these loans and we can get the money out to people that need it faster. That's really what this comes down to.
I don't see it on your list, but I see in the next slide is the 1919 and 912. Any idea how the credit elsewhere rule / personal resource test rule will be impacted?
How it will be impacted is different question than I think that they're going to, the current legislation proposes that they're setting those both aside right now. So that it doesn't come into play in consideration.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Please confirm that the lenders will be able to collect a packaging fee commensurate with current regulations.
Yeah. So as we all know, the final interim rule that went into effect on March 11th would allow for the packaging, or what's called the origination fee, perhaps now going forward. It could go up from $2,500, which is where it's been for a while historically, to up to $5,000, depending on the loan size. It's kind of a tiered process. So these loans, or these SBA 7A relief loans, will not have borrower guarantee fees. They will not have lender guarantee fees. So the question remains, are we still going to collect this packaging fee or not, especially when lenders are going to be asked predominantly, as it stands right now, to hold this paper for perhaps 6 to 9 months before they can orderly sell it into the secondary market. So we just need clarification on that.
Some of the vendors are not going to like this conversation. I already know it. But please confirm that you're expecting lenders to close these loans in-house instead of outside counsel, since a lot of the current documentation is not relevant.
Right. Again, this is one of those things we just don't know. We're asking for some leeway. We need some guidance, some consideration. On a typical 7A working capital loan, there's not that much documentation compared to a business acquisition or real estate 7A loan. So there is the opportunity here to stream this back considerably. And if you're just going to collect the note, have the borrower sign the note, the guarantee, security agreement, maybe a few other forms, that could greatly expedite this process again. But, we need some guidance, clearly. And that goes with funding these loans. I mean, I'm not so sure it's prudent to fund into a borrower's bank account directly. We might want to have some sort of intermediary involved that, maybe it goes through an attorney's trust account or goes through a title company or title agency. But again, this is the kind of very specific direction that I'm asking the agency to start thinking about so they can promulgate these rules quickly.
I love this question. Is the owner's salary part of the trailing 12 months operational expenses?
As of right now, it appears to be up to $100,000. The overage over $100,000, they're probably going to cut that portion out. The same thing goes for when they're going to determine the calculation on the forgiveness on these loans. I think the way I read it is that you'll have credit for payroll for everybody up to the $100,000 compensated employee, and then anything over that's not going to count into the calculation.
Hey, I have about 20 questions.
Okay.
Which we're out of time, but I'll hold them over until tomorrow. I apologize for the 501 cap. It was my understanding that we had a little bit higher capacity, and so we will try to get that fixed by tomorrow. We have a couple of webinars coming up. Collateral is on. There we go. Let's see. Collateral's on Friday, correct, Joseph?
No. 10 tab is tomorrow.
Right.
Remote
10 tabs
employees
tomorrow.
is Friday. Remote employees is Friday, and major rules we're going to repeat on April 1st.
Okay, April 1. Hey, thank you all for joining us. Chris, as always, I enjoyed it. And
Thank you.
We have a lot of stuff to cover tomorrow. Send us your questions. Thank you very much.
All right. Stay healthy, everybody.